In this part, I want to take you through the procedure for motion tracking. For those not familiar with motion tracking, it's a way of tracking a moving object. Once tracked over a period of time, that motion data can be used to apply various effects to the tracked object. This is especially useful when using the Bezier masking tool. In parts 1 and 2, I explained how to animate masks using keyframe animation. The method I used is fine for subjects that have linear movement or few random movements. If the movement of the subject is complex, keyframe animation is not a viable option. In these cases, motion tracking can make the task easier. For the new Vegas Pro user, it's easy to get confused between the term motion tracking and the term track motion. I've already explained what motion tracking is. Track motion is entirely different. Put simply, it allows the frame of a video on a particular track to be manipulated. I won't go into detail about this, but may do a tutorial in the future. Suffice to say that track motion is not motion tracking. Bezier motion tracking has been a feature of Vegas Pro since version 17. I don't know about earlier versions because I don't possess versions earlier than 17. It's worth noting that the method of motion tracking in the Bezier masking tool has changed from version 17. I'm using version 22, so bear that in mind. I have on the timeline a video of some people walking towards the camera. I'm going to place one of the people under witness protection by motion tracking her head and attaching a blurred mask to the tracking data. The lady I want to track is the middle one. First, I'll play the video to determine whether the movement of the lady's head isn't impeded by anything that would disrupt the blurred mask. It's not a big problem if this happens, but I want this to be a simple example. As you can see, this is fine. I now need to decide what part of the lady to track. It's not much use tracking her head because she turns it and this would deviate the mask. An ideal point would be somewhere which moves up and down with her body. The join between her coat and her top on her right side looks to be good. It isn't obstructed by anything throughout the video. So, having decided what to track, I'll apply the Bezier masking effect to the event. As in part 1, I'll change the mask to an oval. I've finished adjusting the mask. Now I can open the General Options section. Now to Motion Track. Clicking the Motion Tracking button opens up its UI. To track the part of the lady's clothing, I need to first add a region. I do this by clicking the blue square with a plus sign. This is the Add Region icon. This places an opaque rectangle on the display. This region can then be manipulated and resized to fit in place. Unfortunately, as you can see, the only part visible on the display is the mask. You may remember in part 1, I explained the blend parameter in the Bezier mask options. This is where it comes in useful. I'll switch to the Bezier mask effect. Now I can adjust the blend so that I can see the whole scene. I'll select the Motion Tracker tab now. I can now adjust the tracking region. The size of the region really depends upon the rate of change of the tracked object over time. If the region is too small and the movement rate is high, it's possible that tracking will be lost. The best way to approach this is to make a good estimate of the size and shape, start the tracking, and if it's successful, job done. If not, some changes will need to be made. Because the people move slowly in this clip, I can make the region fairly small. Now is a good time to describe the motion tracking UI. At the top of the UI is the name of the event that the motion tracking is to be applied. Underneath that is the mask parameter. The drop-down list will contain a list of possible objects to track. In this case, there are only two objects, the Bezier mask and the region that I've just created. We're interested in tracking the region, labelled Region 1, which is selected by default as we've just created it. To the right of the drop-down list are two icons. As mentioned earlier, the blue square with the plus sign creates a new region. The red square with a cross will delete the region. The drop-down arrow to the right of the red square will only appear if the event to be tracked has either a Bezier mask or a picture-in-picture effect applied. In this case, the event has a Bezier mask applied, so the drop-down list is enabled. This list contains 4 options. The first one simply adds a new region. It's described as an empty mask, but essentially it's a new region. A point to note that may confuse you: when you add then delete a region, that region number will not be used again. Adding another region will give it the next number available. The next 2 options are only valid if you have Boris FX's Mocha, so I won't deal with those. I'll describe the final option after the motion has been tracked. The checkbox labelled Track Outside Region will do what it states. Everything outside the region will be tracked. I've never had cause to use this option, but I'm sure there will be scenarios where this would be wanted. In this case, it will remain unchecked. Below that is a drop-down list, where the default option is Accurate. The options in this list determine the degree of accuracy of the tracking data. The other 2 options are Balanced and Fast. The 3 settings provide trade-offs between speed and accuracy, fast being the least accurate. It's a matter of personal choice which option is used. The next drop-down list determines how tracking is to be implemented. The type of data recorded is determined by the option selected in this list. The default is Perspective. This detects any apparent 3-dimensional movement. My advice is not to use this option. I've never had any satisfactory results using this. I'm sure it will be improved over time. Location is the first option, which should be good enough most of the time. This simply tracks movement under the region in the horizontal and vertical directions. The next option also tracks location, but also tracks any rotational movement under the region. Similarly, the next tracks any change to the scale of the area under the region, as well as the location. The next will track how the area under the region changes shape, and also tracks location. Under this, there is a checkbox labelled Show Motion Vectors. It becomes enabled when tracking is complete. If there are any errors during the tracking, this option can be used to see how these errors occurred. At the bottom of the UI are the transport controls. From the left, these are: track backward from the timeline playhead to the beginning of the event. Track 1 frame back from the timeline playhead. This is useful for correcting any tracking errors. Track in both directions. Track forward from the playhead position, then backward from that same position. Track 1 frame forward from the timeline playhead. Track forward from the timeline playhead to the end of the event. The next icon is used when tracking has been successful. The icon is dragged to the event so that the motion data is transferred to that event. Finally, there is a Motion Data Transfer menu drop-down. This will contain the name of the event to which motion data is to be transferred. Hovering the mouse over this name will open up options at the end. In this case, there are 2 options: Add Freeze Motion Effect, which we aren't interested in, and Vegas Bezier Masking, which we are. I'll now track the region. The time it takes to track will vary depending on a number of things. Obviously, the longer the event, the longer the tracking will take. Also, the precision option will have an effect, and the degree of movement. You get the idea. The tracking can be checked by playing the timeline. As you can see, tracking is fairly accurate, with not much drift. The unbroken green line shows that tracking was maintained throughout the event. The thing to note though, if you close the motion tracking UI down, then reopen it, the green line will be broken, implying that tracking wasn't successful. I don't know why it does this, so if tracking initially was successful, I should ignore this. You notice that I opened the motion tracking UI using the button on the Bezier masking UI. If you open it by clicking on the motion tracking tab in the plugin chain, the motion tracking UI doesn't open. Instead, you get a message telling you to access it using the tool's video menu. So to avoid this message, open it using the button on the Bezier masking UI. You then need to select the region. Having tracked the region, we now need to copy the tracking data to the Bezier masking tool. There are two ways of doing this. You can use the motion track transfer icon or the motion track transfer menu drop-down. To use the motion track transfer icon, click and hold it, then drag it to the event which has the mask and release. You'll then be presented with two options. Select the Bezier masking option. This will transfer the tracking data to the Bezier masking effect. The time to transfer will depend upon the length of the clip and the motion tracking options selected. After transfer, the keyframe controller will open. I'll play the timeline. You can see that the mask follows the lady's movement accurately. I'll undo all that and show the other method of data transfer. The other method uses the motion track transfer menu drop-down list. Click on this and it shows the relevant event. At the end of this entry, there's another drop-down list. You'll see that there's the same options as when I used the motion track transfer icon. You see that both options do the same thing. There could, however, be scenarios where one option would be preferable to the other. I'll play the timeline again. Now I can close the motion tracker down. If I'm satisfied with the tracking result, I can also remove the motion tracker from the plugin chain. Now I can apply the blur effect to the mask. After you've selected the Gaussian blur effect, don't forget to click the Add button before you click OK. I'll leave the settings as is. The next step is important. I must move the Gaussian blur entry in the plugin chain to before the Bezier masking entry. I can now switch to the Bezier masking UI. To apply the blur to the mask only, I select the Mask FX checkbox. I now have to eliminate the blend. You can see that there's not much of a blur there, so I'll switch back to the Gaussian blur option. I'll change the settings a little. That's better. Of course, the degree of blur depends upon the circumstances. To enhance the mask a little, I'll add a slight feather. I said in part 2 that I would deal with keyframe interpolation if there was time. It's obvious that there isn't time in this part. What I will do is devote a full tutorial about the keyframe controller. There's a lot going on in the UI, so it deserves a full tutorial. Watch out for that. Again, thanks for watching, and I welcome any questions you may have. Until the next time, bye for now.